exciting. Almost. Here we go. And click to expand and mute. Okay. Oops. Like half of what I'm learning in doing these live streams is just how to deal with the tech and get the tech to do the things that I want it to do. Okay. So, hello. So, today I want to go into some things that have been lighting up for me around what it means to make a difference. This is this is me staring at some I feel like I've been watching a lot of systems for quite some time, a lot of political systems and psychological systems, but what's involved in making a difference in my own psyche, what needs to happen for social groups to shift. It feels sort of like being an engineer, getting a feeling for, oh, okay, here are the thermodynamics. Here's what has to happen. You have to put pressure on the system this way in order for it to move. There's a couple of principles that I see are really consistent and important that, well, actually, let me rewind a little bit. Part of the reason I want to speak to this question of how to actually make a difference is that I encounter a lot of people and a lot of energies from collections of people that are about trying to make the world a better place or trying to deal with the chaos that's going on, trying to, or even at the level of how do I transform my own psyche? How do I make myself more effective on a day-to-day basis? Or how do I have more peace? It's the same principle. It actually doesn't matter what scale we're talking about. The mechanics are almost exactly the same. But I get surrounded by a lot of people, a lot of people who are like addicted to saving the world would be one way to put it. Or on the, like that's one side is like, how do we save the world? How do we deal with all the chaos that's going on? How do I do the most good I can do? I can encounter a lot of people like this. And on the other side, I encounter a lot of people who have yep, we're screwed. There's nothing we can do about it. We're just riding hell down as things crash. Just enjoy the ride, try to find a nice place to be comfortable, and yep, we're just all fucked. Yep, just got to live with it. You know, I'm not going to try to crack people out of their shells if they want to hide. That's perfectly fine. But I do want to speak to, you know, if you actually want to create a kind of influence, there are actual laws about what can and cannot work for that to happen. As a culture, we systematically skip over these laws. I can see why. I understand why. I can go over the why as to why we skip over them, but you don't have to skip over them. This is like hard-earned wisdom that I would like to offer to anybody who wants to listen to this. So I'm thinking in particular about, and this is not my primary audience, but a lot of people who listen to my live streams are of this type. Like a lot of folk who are living in a space of how do I contribute to a positive singularity, the common language. Like this is something I was wrapped into for a long time. You know, let me make a slight shift. I feel myself leaning in the direction of teaching and telling people what they need to hear, which is one of the things that I'm working on weeding out of myself. So let me share a little of myself here, a little of what I've had to learn. So I have had a long addiction to saving the world and saving other people and helping other people to align themselves with the right thing. This is part of why I'm trying to get out of just teaching to make people better. It's part of a habit that doesn't serve me and it doesn't serve other people very well at all. it's coming from a good place in the heart, but there's a lot of energy associated with it that it has a rescuing pattern. Like, how do I rescue? How do I matter? How do I justify my existence and feel good about myself? That how do I prove that I have value? These are not conscious thought. Well, they're now conscious, but these are not the thoughts that generated this originally. They were just these feelings from below. I built this company down in California, the Center for Applied Rationality, co-built technically. I worked with a bunch of people to make this thing exist and to build a curriculum with the idea that we had an idea of how to make people be sane. And if we could teach people, we could steer the world in a direction that would allow it to solve its own problems. There wasn't even an attempt to have control. It was just, how can we contribute to making a good world? So there are two really key issues that I keep noticing over and over again that were absolutely alive in me that I still have to be really careful of. It's constant work. I'm getting better at it, but I'm finding more subtleties, and the smaller subtleties in some sense actually matter more. So there are two really critical junctures where I notice in myself, and I keep seeing in people around me who want to make a positive impact in the world, two key junctures where there's something missing, that while that's missing, the efforts can't matter. They can't. Okay? I'll just give this as a simple fact. It doesn't matter how passionate you are in your activist efforts. Your own contributions, your uniqueness, what you actually have to bring, the power that you have to deliver into the world cannot be delivered. It cannot manifest if these two factors aren't addressed. That doesn't mean your energy is irrelevant, but it does mean that you basically have no power of choice. You have no capacity to bring in positivity that is because of what you see is important. Okay. As I go through this is at the risk of violating some very precious sense of identity for some people, because I include a lot of the classic activist efforts in this. I think most activism cannot matter for the reasons that I'm going to highlight. That isn't to say that the collective effect of activism has had no impact on the world. But I mean that your efforts to matter cannot matter until these two factors are addressed. So one of them I've been hinting at here is this, like, where is the drive coming from? So there's a need to ask that question. I don't mean there's a desire, and hopefully a desire gets cultivated, but to the extent that we do not ask why we are doing what we do, our motives can be hijacked. Hijacked by what? Well, I spent a lot of time in August going over some of the details of this, but the short version is we are in a global information war. And we're seeing some of the war-like effects now. It's starting to become more apparent. 2020 was getting our attention about this, but it still looks as though it's about a pandemic, and it looks as though it's about people going crazy with conspiracy theories. And it looks as though, like in the circles that I'm in, there's a whole lot of like, oh, obviously Trump is nuts. Obviously Trump is the evil person. And I was like, okay, what do you think is happening in those circles? What do you think their conversations sound like? Like, where do you think the Me Too movement came from, or why the anger around Black Lives Matter came about? Do you think all of these are separate? We're in a very exciting time, but it's not exciting because just a whole bunch of random coincidences all happen to happen at the same time. Right? They're all linked. They're all linked. So we're looking at, and I don't mean to paint a picture of like some sort of conspiracy theory. Like I'm not highlighting anything like that. I'm saying that if you actually look at how the world works, if you actually pay attention to how these systems are interconnected, like there have been people who have been talking about this kind of calamity, not knowing it was going to be specifically a pandemic, but knew it was going to be something. A pandemic was one of the options. that would create this cascading effect of increasing chaos. So this is the result of accelerating global multipolar memetic war, information war. And so here we are in this situation where, like, I've had this basic defense strategy of emphasizing a sort of a chant: all information is crap, because all information right now is a kind of propaganda. I don't just mean the mainstream, I mean all of it. All of it is corrupt. All of it is engineered to control minds. I mean, not literally all of it, but like it's like more and more of it is. So if you aren't paying attention to the energetic origin at the somatic level, like what the pull is for why you are making the choices you're making, about what causes you're diving into, what you're trying to do, then that means that almost guaranteed the causes of your choices come from these influences. Coming through media, they're coming through your social groups, they're coming through your own past traumas. Like there's a huge array of them, although the past traumas are themselves intertwined with these systems. So if you want to actually create meaningful change in the world and you're not paying attention to where your desire to create meaningful change is coming from, I guarantee what you're doing will not matter, because it becomes part of the very system you're trying to control. The system that you're trying to affect, rather. Right? So this is a big tangle that I got into in trying to create and co-create and co-run the Center for Applied Rationality. There's this huge amount of energy that went into, how do I make the world good through my efforts to teach sanity? The problem in that, I can break this down. I've done this in some of the other videos, but I think it's worth emphasizing as many times as needed. And I don't assume anybody who's seeing any of my videos has seen any of the previous ones. Oh, quick side note before I go into that. Keep meaning to mention this at the start, and I keep forgetting. As far as I can tell, I cannot get notifications for people who rewatch the video and then make comments. I get the reactions, but I don't see the comments unless you tag me. So you need to tag my name, Michael Smith, in comments that you make if you're making the comment when watching this as a replay instead of watching it live. Okay, so just so you know. And if you don't care whether I see it or not, perfectly fine. Okay, so on meta. So the problem I kept running into with CFAR, with the Center for Applied Rationality, was, well, one of the problems was this implicit issue that the whole reason I was leaning into this was I wanted to do something that mattered. But there was an emotional emphasis on the I. I want to do something that matters. There's a particular moment where I failed to catch what this implied. It bugged me and I chewed on it intellectually, but I didn't look in my body. I didn't get the signal about, let me pay attention to the origin of emotions and motivation. Sometime in, I think it was 2013-ish. I'd have to go back and look at the dates, but Google announced its Calico project. Now, I haven't heard hide or hair from the Calico project basically since then, but this was Google saying, let's just cure aging. We're going to throw Google's resources at curing aging. And curing aging had been a pretty major thing in my past, like finding a way to get the human race to a place where it decides that aging is an important problem and then try to do something about it. And seeing not only that Google just did this move, but that I had basically nothing to do with it. I had put years and years of effort and energy into coordinating people and trying to make things happen to shift the tide around attitudes around aging as a strategy for causing meaningful anti-aging research to happen. And that had no causal connection that I was aware of to Google deciding to do this. And my reaction was to feel depressed. right? I didn't notice fully what that had to mean at the time. It meant that, so I could intellectually recognize, oh, that's good. Google's resources are going to this. This problem is going to be solved. But it hit me at my heart. And I felt this sinking feeling in my gut. I felt this sense of, and I found myself having this feeling of, does anything I do matter? So what that means is the motive that I had before in working on aging, and I realized I switched topics, but it's the same energy. Right? The motive that I had for working on aging was not predominantly and purely coming from recognizing a problem and taking action to deal with it. It was about me. It was about me having value. It was about me having an impact on the world. It was about me proving my worth, having a place in the world. So getting a reflection back of this project that I had spent all this time on, I ended up switching from that over to CFAR. In part as thinking CFAR might actually be the best angle on dealing with aging anyway. But I had kind of switched and then seeing, oh, Google's got this, and I had no impact on that. And there was a feeling of, do I even trust myself to be doing anything relevant with CFAR? When I would hear about groups who would go through the CFAR workshops, and like some people would do really well, like, oh, yeah, look at this person is doing meaningful things with their lives, that's great. But when others, when like at one point we had a team from within Facebook who came and trained with us for a day or a weekend. I forget exactly what the length of time was, but we did a training with them. And then as far as we could tell, there was basically no meaningful impact that I can recall. I may be misremembering details, but I remember one effect of that was that we decided we weren't going to do that kind of thing anymore because we didn't know how to do that well. But for me, there was this sinking feeling of, art, is what I'm doing even relevant? Okay, so the issue there was that my purpose in engaging with these projects, even though it was very good on paper, it was very good in logic, and I believed the logic. And looking back, I still look at that and go, I missed a couple of things, but given what I missed, the logic was correct. The content makes sense. But where my core was coming from, what the energies were in the body, the things arising, weren't about how do I make the world sane? How do I make the world work? It was, how do I make the world work? How do I save the world? It wasn't even a matter of, I mean, there was and is some part of me that loves to stand on stage and have people admire me and be impressed. I actually don't feel any shame or problem about that. I just track it. It's part of my joy. I like theatric attention. I was homeschooled, but if I hadn't been, I probably would have been a theater geek, almost definitely. So the um, the issue is more that this meanness focus meant that there was no opportunity for me to get around this wounding. This I need to fill my heart with validation. There was no option for getting around that and to actually having a real effect. So because of that, I'm not saying that this is sufficient, but it is necessary. It's absolutely necessary for me to be able to show up here and have any impact on my viewers in a way that can actually matter. That's not just about more of the same. I'm not just adding more emotional noise. I have to be willing to not care whether I have that effect. That can't be the engine. That can't be the source. Okay, so that's one big chunk, recognizing where is my motive coming from. The big hint here, from what I can tell, this is me extrapolating a little bit. My own experience is that any motive other than the joy of opening, of being here, um, is another angle that some other people resonate with more, which is of being of service. Um, which I think it requires some infrastructure to have a good intuition for what that means. But I think a kind of boiled down version, it's missing the infrastructure, but like is a lived version of a lot of it. I think there's this. If the act of doing, if just being is a pleasure, if this is an exquisite moment, that's a really good sign. If it doesn't matter whether others cheer or whether others boo or whether others completely ignore, that might impact, but if that doesn't define the quality of what's coming through, that's a really good sign. That means that there's an independence of the heart, an independence of with respect to the system around. That means it is possible to introduce something new. Without that, we're just adding more of the same emotional gunk, more of the same drama that caused those imprints in the first place. The things in me that created this feeling of, oh, do I even matter? Why would I have ever thought to ask that question? Why does it matter if I matter on the global scale or on large scales? Why does it matter at all? Maybe I don't. Maybe I will never impact things on the scale that I've always imagined I would love to see, I want to see happen. Maybe my ideas will not ever echo out into having some sort of great effect. Can I be with that? Can I prefer truth? So that's one piece. There's one really key piece. Paying attention to where my desires are coming from, and in particular, my desire to make a difference. I have a second point, but I see Nikhil is popping in. Hello. Nikhil says, I hope you don't a comment in the middle of your talk. So you think you mean don't mind, yeah. And I certainly don't. That's why I'm doing these live. If I minded, I would just make recordings and then upload the recordings. Sometimes I find the same thing happening in reverse. When listening to someone, the mind will build a response that will feel good to say, I can impress them later, I think, rather than truly listening or learning. I may or may not be doing that right now. Yep. Yeah, I agree. I have a whole host of topics that burst to mind for me today. One of them was about what is the art of really generous listening. Yeah, I think that it is related, but I think that it starts not from trying to make myself listen to the other person generously, making myself be present. It's instead by noticing what's the resistance about in me. Can I be present with that and sort of move the energies through me? And as opposed to bottling them up and trying to act independently of the energies that are alive in me. So I think it's very much the same mechanism. Okay. Hello, Daniel Blanc pops in and says, naive answer, because I consume resources that would render me net negative and thus better off not existing if my existence does not commensurately improve the world. It seems extremely difficult to decouple this logic from self-judgment. Ari, regarding why ask if one even matters. Yeah, so this is, it's a good point, and it's also, it's an infection. It's a mental infection. And the purpose of that thought is to break your mind. The purpose of that thought is not to guide you to truth. That's just how it works. Um, there's a part of me that wants to dive into the logic of it. I think that part is mostly the mind. But the honest answer is no. Just no. What do you mean you're better off not existing? Why are you taking an authority outside yourself as a better source of your internal sense of your own value instead of noticing yourself? You don't have to listen to that logic. Also, the logic is wrong. But the reason the logic is wrong is that the logic is correct within the container it's in, but the container is false. The container doesn't reflect truth. I think that's all I want to say about that one. So I don't want to get lost in the head about this stuff too much. Samuel Fransman, hello. He says, so how did that infection get there then? That's a good question. That's a really good question. Oh, there's like this historian that gets really excited in me. As an aside, I do want to get onto that second point, but as an aside, I am likely fairly soon to go into to start doing a series that'll be a video series that will be independent of these daily live streams, that is just giving me an outlet for being able to describe sort of the history of meaning and magic and esotericism and the way that theory systems of myth and lived meaning making actually works in the westernized world. There's so many pieces that are very alive for me that helps to answer questions like this. How did this happen? Why did we get this installed? I mean, one of the short answer, trying not to dive into all of the history of that. So the short answer that I understand for how that infection got there in the first place is that we as a culture agreed to emphasize thought logic over our connection to truth, our connection to our own sense of embodied lived truth. And there's a reason for that. That has a cause for why we did that. But the net effect of that was to make it so that the thoughts that propagated best were the ones that would best sort of jab the animal that can think. There's a whole lot of reasons for that, but the basic function of it is to keep the system that our culture is based on is built on a foundation that requires us to stay disconnected from our lived sense of truth. So it becomes very, very dangerous to a lot of these systems if we start being willing to ignore the thoughts and anchor in truth. Now, we can't actually be fully disconnected from truth. That's why we're able to think at all, why we're able to survive. This shows up in programming and mathematics quite a lot, when you can tell that you have the right solution without having to refer to an authority. That's connecting with lived truth. The ability to recognize that you see the truth of a theorem is lived truth. It's your own truth. But as a culture, the idea that you could look at an argument, see that the argument is logically correct, and still know that it's false, that's dangerous to a lot of the systems that our culture is built on. So not because of there being people who bring in controls. That may have happened, but this would happen independently of there being individuals trying to do this. There are emergent control systems that come into place that cause us to raise children with a lot of sense of internal inadequacy and a sense that you have to earn your own value. Your value is under question. Are you being a good boy, a good girl? Right? It evolved, it grew. So that's the short version. Okay, cool. Looks like I'm caught up on pertinent comments for that. So that's, I noticed that the lighting is doing something strange because of the backdrop of the white. Let me see if I can, okay, let's see if that stops doing the flicker thing. All right, so that's the first domain, the first necessity. If anybody who wants to actually matter in their impact in the world needs like requirement, prerequisite, absolute necessity. You've got to track where the drive to matter is coming from, where the drive to actually make a difference is coming from. Okay? And the short version of cleaning that up is, if it's coming from Karpman's triangle, or from also called the victim triangle, if one of those energies is involved in the why, it's not going to matter. You may be able to stir noise, but it's not going to shift culture in a meaningful way. It's not, and if you're doing it inside your own psyche, you're just going to do internal violence, trying to make yourself change your behavior, and then pressure will build up and you'll find yourself feeling guilty or getting sick, like literally physically sick. People can make themselves sick, and then snapping back into previous patterns, or maybe you change things but it turns out not to have the effect that you were looking for, and then you end up feeling the same. To create real change, it's actually necessary to track where the drive to create change is coming from. If that has any victim flavor to it, any victim triangle flavor to it, to the extent that it does, you're not going to be able to create change. Okay, so that's prerequisite 1. Prerequisite 2 is, my mind's drawing a blank. I'm glad I wrote this down. Yay. Yeah. Okay, good. There's been this kind of funny effect that I've noticed where as I've become more centered in the present moment, and in having my mind come more into service of my clarity, I find that there are certain anxiety patterns that I've been using to keep ideas in mind and readily available so that I can be sure to say them. But I'm now not using the anxiety, so I'm sometimes dropping them. I'm building a new mental emotional system to track plans for how to say the things that I want to say. So the second piece, the second side, which is no less important and in some senses the same thing, is to notice where your actual control and power are and put your energy there. And to stop putting your energy where you don't have control or power. No. What I mean by that, my mind explodes with examples. It's sort of almost overwhelming. But one example that comes to mind is how, like, it's popping to mind now as I was about to grab a current political example, and then I'm reminded of a post that I read earlier today about avoid unnecessarily political examples. If you know how to use political examples, consider using ones from the past where people aren't riled up. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Let me grab in the individual scale first, while I let that piece of my mind chew on it. So, I now have a very regular and exercise routine that keeps my body trim, keeps it fit, athletic and strong, keeps my joints in a good position. All my joints do this kind of hypermobile thing, so I have to strengthen strengthen the support structures around my joints to keep my body really stable. Now, in the past, there's a part of me that actually just really enjoys exercise. This is like a blessing that I personally have. But getting myself to do the same routine every day to make sure that I'm strengthening my shoulder joints, because I actually had surgery on both of my shoulders, so there's some physical therapy exercises that if I don't do them and I do other exercises too much, I'll actually get impingement of the shoulders, and it becomes very painful. So, but the exercises are kind of boring, and so that sense of, oh, it's boring, but I need to do it anyway, so I'm going to make myself do it. There's something that I had to track about the fact that while I have the power on the time scale of minutes to make myself do the boring physical therapy exercises for my shoulders, I do not have the power to just make myself do them every day. I have fantastic follow through willpower. I'm unusually strong, but I can't do that. I can't just override myself continually, ongoingly for the rest of my life. Even if I allow myself something like occasionally skipping and I don't make a big deal out of it, I don't have that power. Putting more effort into it, going, yeah, it's really important, but if I don't do this, I'm gonna have my shoulders may dislocate more, and then I might have to get another surgery. And I can add that energy, but that's not a point of leverage. The effort to add that extra energy mostly is just feeding a kind of shame cycle and a fear cycle. It's mostly feeding my own sense of I'm doing something wrong with my own body. And it doesn't actually get me to do the exercises every day. What I had to do, this is very similar to the first point I was making. What I had to do was pay attention to where the resistance is in me. Why is the boringness an issue? And feel into it. This is not analytic. For those of you who've gone through any of the CFAR workshops, I'm talking about something analogous to goal factoring, but goal factoring is very cognitive. I'm talking about a very somatic emotional process that is about recognizing that every energy that arises from below spontaneously is itself a creative power. Just fact. You can observe this. And if I don't address each of those energies, if I don't address the generator of those energies somehow, then if one of those energies is conflicting with my intent, then that energy is going to keep conflicting with my intent. So I've got to go inside and work with it. So that's what I did. I worked with this sense of kind of boringness to it. I felt into it, and the exact process of how I did it, that's almost its own video, really. I did a whole lot of energetic work, but and when I say energetic work, I mean something phenomenological. There's something unfortunate about the fact that the word energy is the best word that I have for this, and I think it means the same thing that a lot of people mean in mystical and spiritual contexts when they talk about energy, but it doesn't mean the same thing as what a lot of other people mean when they talk about energy. I don't mean a stuff. I don't mean some kind of magical spiritual stuff. I mean a direct experience. I'm talking about engineering phenomenology. So tracking that the point of leverage that I have is not in making myself do the thing. Even if I were to somehow do it, I often end up with body damage. But the reason I had to get shoulder surgery was because I ran into some problems practicing parkour. And I knew I needed to strengthen my shoulders. So I made myself push through the pain against my own physical and emotional resistance. I made myself go to the gym and do a bunch of exercises that turned out to grind my bones against a tear in my cartilage. And then I had to get surgery in order to get my arms to stop hurting constantly, in order for my shoulders to stop literally falling out of joint. Right? So even if I had the option of getting myself to do the action, the feedback I was having from reality, and including my body, meant that I couldn't take the action in practice. So the key question is, where is my actual point of choice? The actual point of choice I have is where I direct my attention and where I place my intention. I could choose to address the energies. That is a point of leverage. Making my body move to do the exercises regularly is not a point of leverage. This is not something I analyze with my mind. It's a matter of me paying attention to the ground level truth of where does my influence actually matter. I have some other examples to give about this. So they're very important. So the things that I've been thinking of here predominantly having to do with the social and political climate that we're in. And I see that I have another comment here. Nikhil, actually, I don't know how to pronounce your name. If you want to give me a pronunciation guide, I would be happy to hear it or to read it. Okay, so Nikhil says, if the desire to keep your shoulders strong continues every day, which I assume it does, doesn't that keep the push instinct going? The problem that comes with fear and tension notwithstanding isn't the ability to push like that sustainable if its root desire is. Yes, and in practice, that's what I did. The problem is that while I had this desire to do the exercises, I also had this desire not to because they're boring. Oh, your name is obscenely hard. When we see each other again, you talk me through it. Okay, cool. Sounds good. All right. So the problem is that that if the desire, how to say that, the desire already being there, why haven't I already have been doing them every day? Why do I have to make a change? Okay, so just observing that there is a desire that is in alignment with a direction that I want to change doesn't answer the question, why is the system in a state that hasn't shifted in the direction that I want already? Why am I considering a change? The answer to that can't be because I need to want it more. Like if that's true, then like, like there's this problem of, well, maybe if I just back the want more, I'll put more energy into it. Against what? So there's this kind of confusion that I see systematically. It's like it's lived inside myself. I've purged like 70% of this, and it's just been amazing to see how much energy I waste on trying to push through things that don't move instead of trying to get through a wall by pushing harder on the wall instead of searching for a door, right? So the the reason this comes to mind, I'm trying to think of a good straightforward historical example. You know, I'm going to have to grab some of the modern ones. I don't really have a good historical example that's popping to mind. I probably will in a few minutes. So with okay, so like in over this summer, we had all of this stuff about the critical race theory showing up with the Black Lives Matter movement. There's a whole lot of there's a whole lot of energy that a lot of people, suspiciously, just as a side note, predominantly white people screaming about it, which is just fascinating. There's some interesting historical reasons for that, but setting that aside for a moment. There's a lot of people who are getting really adamant about things like white silence is violence. But they're not putting, they weren't putting it forward with an energy that had the flavor of, oh, like, it's worth considering. White silence is violence. So we want to account for these. It didn't have the sort of cleanliness to it in that sense. I mean, by cleanliness, I don't mean lack of passion. It could have had, yes, white silence is violence. Like there's a way where you could have a lot of energy behind a statement like that and really go, yes, no, this is important, without having the white silence is violence, right? The persecutor energy from Cartman's triangle. So having that persecutor energy in there, that you have to change your behavior. You have to, like, adding that attempt at control. Now, at a societal level, that has effects, but as an individual, there's a challenge, which is when you're leaning into trying to say, trying to make someone believe, like if you've gotten the kind of flash of clarity and you've gone, oh, systematic racial oppression, implicitly buying into implicitly being complacent in the system that creates these issues, and by being a beneficiary, yada yada. Okay, I get that. Right? I have many challenges to give to this framework, but setting that aside for the moment, for the sake of the example, um, taking in something like that, and going, okay, all right. So now, having taken that in, it's really important that we white people, and this is the place where there's a pivot, there's a kind of insanity that comes into play. We white people need to speak up. That means you and you and you and you have to talk. And I'm doing my part by speaking up. The problem is that the point of leverage that's just been identified, it's not really a point of leverage. What I actually want to say is that the place where the energy is going is not a joint, it's a bone. It's the place where energy is going now requires other people's behavior to change in order for the individual in question to be okay. When that shift happens, it then becomes necessary to manipulate. It becomes necessary to add coercion in order to try to make other people fall in line. And that only works to the extent that other people buy into the coercion framework, that they can buy into that other people have the power to tell you whether you're a good person, to tell you what is or is not true, and that if you disagree, then there is something wrong with you. If you take that in and that's believable to you, then you're manipulable. So you have to buy into this alienation of truth and that other people's opinions matter for your own personal value. You have to sort of buy into this kind of framework in order to be manipulable. So the act of manipulating with this kind of pressure presumes people buying into this framework, and it supports it. So the very act of trying to create a better world, even if critical race theory were perfectly correct, and it really is essential for white people to speak up about this and to take action, there's a poison that gets added by the very act of trying to apply pressure in a direction that that's not where your control is. If I as a white person do not have control over what white people do, I have control over what I do. That's it. And even then, that's questionable. Controlling what I do is very tricky. It's very, very tricky. The same kind of thing shows up, this same process, this same mechanism shows up when people get sucked into what kinds of taxation policies the government should have. What's this opinion doing? Okay, even if you're right, what is saying the opinion for? What are these words for? Why is this the important idea to express? What is it in service of? I think all of this can come down to this first point. What is the cause of the action you're choosing? Okay. I spent many years, actually this probably would have been a cleaner, a less triggery example for people to be able to listen to. I spent many years trying to guilt people into taking questions of aging seriously. It didn't work because I didn't have this cultural backing behind it. There isn't this whole memeplex. There isn't the memeplex around aging nearly as much in terms of this is something that we need to take seriously as a society. In fact, there's very much the opposite. There's an attitude of what do you mean? There's no problem. Like it's natural. It is an unfortunate truth of life. Feeling myself getting riled up there with a lot of anger and a desire to destroy that perspective. And that's actually, let me grab that. Let me grab that as a real-time example. Right now, I feel a lot of anger that tries to arise in rehearsing what I keep encountering as the attitude towards aging. It's this tone of there's nothing we can do about it. If there was something to do about it, it probably wouldn't be a good idea. Uh, and um, and here are some cached ideas that I have, some automatic arguments about it. If we did something about aging, what about immortal dictators? Don't we need to make room for the next generation? So there's this logic that I can see that infuriates me. So I feel this invitation in myself, this hooking, this energetic arising of I want to destroy that idea. But that isn't a place where I have control. I don't have control over what others think about aging. I don't have control over what culture thinks about aging. I don't have control over what culture does about aging. I have control over, I can move my fingers. I have control over where I can place my attention. I don't have control over how I move my fingers continuously over days at a time. I outsource that to machinery. The same kind of, I'm realizing that that's going to be difficult to explain. Let me set that aside. Um, what I have control over is something about the immediacy of my choices and my awareness right now. So to be able to affect something like the way that all of culture deals with aging, I can't do it by trying to affect how culture deals with aging. That isn't a joint I can move. That isn't a muscle I have. There's no control over there. It doesn't mean I can't influence it, but I can't influence it directly. And I can't influence it directly better just by revving up stronger feelings and trying harder. That's not a point of leverage. The point where I have leverage is what is the source of energy in me? Why do I want to do this? Where is the motive force coming from? If I pay attention to that, first off, that is a place where I have power. I can choose to unhook myself. It's a little tricky. I don't have direct power. I can't just poof, okay, now I don't get upset about pro-aging ideas or dismissal. I don't have that power. That's not a point of leverage. But what is a point of leverage is bringing my awareness to it and intending to release it. If I can show up living my life well, I'm noticing myself feeling a little itchy. There's something like, I feel like if I were structuring this as a lesson where this is the thing that I want to be sure to say, I'm noticing there's a piece where I would want to go back and reweave this a little bit and embody this a little bit better. I've been focusing on what goes wrong. I want to highlight a little bit about what I see is possible with this going right. Originally, I was going to title this about how do you save the world? Because I'm surrounded by a lot of people who care about saving the world. I'm not surrounded anymore, but I get pings from people who care a lot about saving the world. And basically what I want to say is, well, if you want to save the world, here are two things. First, notice why you care about saving the world. Is it about you? And second, there's nothing to save. The world's fine. I don't mean this as a Pollyanna thing. I mean this as if you see the truth clearly, you recognize that you can't be in anything other than truth. It's fine. The whole thing is fine. If you can breathe into that and prioritize, how do you live a good life? That might involve caring for other people's well-being. It importantly includes an element of not getting in the way of other people's ability to do the same thing, like giving other people the room to breathe and to respect the fact that they can take care of themselves. People really are fantastically competent, right? So they, without needing to save, without needing to force, if you can actually let go of that, if you can fully let go of any inclination to make other people live differently in order for you to be okay, and you can just live your life fully and recognize that there is nothing to save, then you become a conduit for doing the thing that you might want to call saving the world. I think it's a terrible phrasing for it because it creates a paradox. The paradox is false. The paradox comes from a presumption that there's something wrong. What we're seeing as a species right now is, I was just talking with someone earlier this evening about this, about what we're seeing is the human race going through puberty. These are growing pains. There's some serious question about, well, are we going to survive? Because the species is waking up as something that is a degree of momentously powerful that, as far as we know, has never existed before. And as it thrashes around and has hormonal fits, does it chop off its head? Well, that's a possibility. It's not my dominant guess right now. I think we'd actually just, I think this may not be pleasant, but it looks to me like in most versions, we actually pull through in some version or another. Um, what we're looking at is the choice of, as a species, do we pull through on a time scale of decades, or do we pull through on a time scale of centuries? And do we have to go back and relearn some of these lessons, or are we going to ignore them this time? Or are we going to ignore the lessons and have to get another go at learning them in the future? Or do we actually take it in this time? By lessons, I don't mean like there's a lesson plan. I mean, we are fitting to reality. But what we're encountering is our ways of being disconnected from truth have come to matter too much. And now we have to disregard our past ways of believing and orienting to what truth was and recognize what truth is. If we don't do that, then reality will crush us. That's what we're looking at. Okay. But that's at a global level. That's at a societal level. That's at a species level. I don't have power over the species level. The species, the species isn't self-aware yet. The species doesn't have species level control. There is no entity at that scale that has enough self-awareness to make a choice, as far as I know. But that level of choice does exist at the level of the individual, at the level of you, and at the level of me. So the kind of way of being that is compatible with a sane species that is self-aware and that makes sane choices, that pulls through this kind of puberty transition. What that organism, what that superorganism is like, and that includes me as part of it, has me prioritizing, paying attention to my motives for where my motive force is coming from, and recognizing that where I can act, like I am not the brain of the species. So it doesn't do me any good to try to make the species do something different. But I can pay attention to where my actions actually matter and attend there. And what that is primarily has to do with paying attention to my own motive forces, my own motivations, and living my life well. Noticing that there is something really pleasurable. Something pleasurable is not quite right, quite the right word for it. It's more like staggeringly wondrous about experiencing anything at all. Just being here Like here, do you realize you're watching this video? Watching a video on a screen. There's a way to be in touch with the wonder of that. That doesn't have to go through the rigmarole of the technology. It is fundamental to, I have hands. What I'm describing here isn't sufficient to create a self-aware superorganism of the human race, but it is necessary, and it goes a long way there. Being willing to relax, to be open, to let go of the insistence that I know what's best. I know what the species needs to do. I know what turns other people need to make. I don't. I don't even know what turns I need to make. I'm still working on, okay, how do I orient in a healthy way to the energies in me that are about being victimized? My automatic tendency is to vilify them and try to condemn them and rip them out of me. That's inherently paradoxical. So how do I honor them without giving them the steering wheel? That I can engage in. That's work I can do. That's a place of leverage. Asking that question, being willing to recognize I don't have the answer. Noticing that I care about these larger issues. I care about the pain of Black people. I care about these, like, certainly about aging. That's definitely a thing I've had a long history of working with. I care about the sort of suffering that happens in this conflict that's going on at the political level in the United States between two sides, although it's far more than two at this point. Like I care about the world, like the natural world, encountering the damage that it's encountering from the sort of checked out from reality-ness of the human race. But rather than getting hooked by it, it doesn't help me to get hooked in to try to make things be different and care passionately and fight for the justice of blah, like whatever the blah is. Like it doesn't help. That adds to the same machine that creates the problems in the first place. It's not a point of leverage. The point of leverage is in me. Recognizing this is what it looks like for other people to be doing their work. And if something intelligent is going to arise, it's not going to arise because I make it arise. It's going to arise because I live an example of what it means to be a cell in this superorganism. And other people do the same thing, maybe because they're inspired by me, maybe because they recognize it independently, maybe because they're pissed off at what I'm doing and decide to do something better. It doesn't matter. That natural arising happens. And that's what creates a globally good picture. It's not about me. It has nothing to do with me. That doesn't mean I have no effect, but it does mean I have no responsibility. It's not my job. My job is to pay attention and to let go. So those two pieces, noticing where the motive is coming from, paying attention where the points of actual leverage are, and ceasing to dump energy into places that cannot matter, like having passionate opinions about what other people should do. Doesn't matter what your passionate opinions about what other people should do are. That's just a hook in you, and that's going to make it hard to come from the right place. So just noticing where are the points of leverage, paying attention to where you're actually coming from. Essential prerequisites for being able to do things that make a difference. I claim. Right, that's all I've got for tonight. Thanks for listening.